Good evening. Over in Arizona, the state Senate has just completed their third counting of the ballots, meaning that they are now just one step away from completing the final audit report. Meanwhile, over by Florida, Cuban refugees are being intercepted by the Coast Guard and being sent back to Cuba. And this is happening, by the way, at the very same time that record numbers of illegal aliens are crossing the U.S. southern border. And according to new data, there is a 900% increase in the number of these border crossers who are testing positive for COVID. Let's go through it all together. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. Now let's begin today's discussion over in Arizona. But actually, just before we do, as a super quick aside, right there at the very top of the description box is a link to Epic TV, which is our brand new no censorship video platform where you can find all of the awesome Epic Times content like The Larry Elder Show, American Thought Leaders, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip, China in Focus, Life and Times, as well as our show Facts Matter. And on there we publish exclusive episodes that, due to the censorship, we just don't post here on YouTube. Again, that link will be right there at the top of the description box. And now let's really head on over to Arizona. Yesterday, we already discussed how Twitter suspended the official account of the Arizona election audit that the Arizona State Senate was using to communicate with the public. And as of today, there has been a small development. Because although Twitter did not get back to us with a comment, they did respond to BuzzFeed News. And they confirmed to BuzzFeed that the ban on this account is actually permanent. They permanently banned the account. Now, as to why they exactly made this decision, well, Twitter claimed that it was because the account violated their rules on platform manipulation as well as spam. Here's specifically what a Twitter spokesperson said. The accounts were permanently suspended for violating the Twitter rules on platform manipulation and spam. Although, if you log in and actually go through that particular policy over on Twitter, it's fairly long, it has many different provisions, and it's not exactly clear how Twitter is accusing the Arizona State Senate of engaging in either manipulation or in spam. And this all ties into a larger discussion centered around criticism that these big tech giants like Twitter are receiving and have been receiving for a while now. Because very often, the way that they conduct these suspensions, or rather the reasoning that they give for these suspensions, is very broad, it's non-specific, and it's vague, to the point that now discussing constitutional court-approved election audits is not allowed on the platform. However, I also think it's worth noting that this ban on Twitter came one day right after PayPal announced that it would be working with law enforcement to monitor what they're calling extremists, and it came a single day after an online counterterrorism organization, which, by the way, Twitter is a member of, announced that it would be shifting their focus away from combating Islamic extremism to instead combating what they called the far right. Regardless, if we get back with any clarification as to why specifically Twitter banned the Arizona election audit account, I'll let you know right away. However, meanwhile, the audit is still continuing on as planned. Just yesterday, the audit team announced that they finished their counting of the ballots and will now shift their focus to compiling a draft report on the audit results. According to Karen Fan, who is the Arizona Senate president, workers completed the third count yesterday over at the Wesley Bolin building, which is in Phoenix, Arizona. Here's specifically what she said. The physical tabulation of the ballots are complete and are being returned to Maricopa County tomorrow. The data gathered by the audit team, which includes this third count, will now be taken back to their labs, which are located in Washington State and in Florida, and they will be analyzed. Just for your reference, by the way, this third count, this third set of numbers, it was needed because the initial recount and the numbers that Maricopa County initially provided didn't match. And so they needed a third number to compare them both to. And now that the third recount is completed, the ballots are heading back. Just earlier today, officials from Maricopa County, they came to the Wesley Bolin building and they picked up the ballots as well as the other subpoenaed items, and they took them back to Maricopa County, to specifically the Maricopa County Tabulation and Election Center, where they will all be stored in a vault. Now, this completion of the third count came just a few days after serious tension developed between the Cyber Ninjas, which is the firm that's leading the audit, and Ken Bennett, who is the audit liaison. That's because back on Monday, Ken Bennett told local media that he was considering stepping down as the liaison since the audit team was refusing to let him into the building. Now, the reasoning for him being locked out was because he shared confidential information with outside analysts, which was eventually leaked to the press. And for your reference, by the way, those outside analysts that he leaked this information to had on previous occasions disparaged the election audit. Here's how Ken Bennett explained what happened. I shared some box counts of how many ballots were in each box, and that got leaked to the press, and I apologized to Senate President Fan. I had promised that information would not be leaked to the press, but it indirectly got done, so that's how I got barred from the audit. He further said that the cyber ninjas were actually keeping certain data from him, and he added that he can only endorse the final report if he was given access to the source data from which it was built upon. Here's specifically what he said. I can't just come in at the last minute and be asked to endorse something that I can't be a part of really building the way it needs to be built. And then, in regards to whether he was going to continue on as liaison, he said this: I do remain locked out of the audit, and as such, it's impossible for me to really function as the liaison. However, he later told a local Arizona newspaper that he had actually come to reach a deal with the Arizona Senate President, Karen Fann, and he is going to remain on as the liaison. In regards to the criticism lobbied by Ken Bennett, here's what Ms. Karen Fann had to say. We should not be looking over their shoulder, telling them how to do their job or asking for premature information. When the audit is complete, then they will need to provide us with all their proof and documentation of their results. She further added that it was irresponsible of Ken Bennett to disclose how many ballots were in some of the boxes to outside analysts, specifically to analysts who have repeatedly disparaged the audit. However, she further added that Ken Bennett would be involved in a vital part of the draft and final reports to ensure their accuracy with his knowledge and contributions throughout the audit process. For your reference, by the way, the final audit report is still scheduled to be released sometime in August, which is now just a few weeks away. If you would like to read more about anything that we discussed over in Arizona, I'll throw all those links down into the description box below this video for you to check out. And now let's move on over to the southern border and discuss how there has been a 900% increase in the COVID infections among the illegal border crossers. Oh, sorry. What's this? Well, that's a great question, Roman. And the answer is that it's today's sponsor, which is an awesome messaging company called Secure. And it's awesome if you're the type of person that actually cares about your privacy. Because it goes without saying that both government actors as well as big tech companies can spy on your documents, your emails, and your chat messages. I mean, I'm sure you experienced it before where you're messaging someone or emailing someone about a certain product or service, and then suddenly you're seeing ads for that exact same product or service. I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on behind the scenes. However, with Secure, they have an answer to that problem because they have their own proprietary encryption technology, which allows you to send text messages, documents, as well as emails and keep them safe and private. And largely, that's because they have their servers and their data center over in Switzerland. Now, why is that important? Well, Switzerland has the strictest data privacy laws in the entire world. That's what they say. And therefore, your messages are not subject to the Intrusive Cloud Act. And if you're interested to know what the Cloud Act is, you can go over to their website, to Secure's website, and they have a great explanation for it. And in my opinion, the best thing about Secure over the other messaging apps that are out there is that you can communicate securely even if the recipient of your message does not use Secure. Basically, you send a message to them, let's say you send a text, and it sends them a link. They click on that link, and it establishes a secure connection that goes through Switzerland so that you can chat with them securely and privately, even if they don't have Secure themselves. So go on over to secure.com, which is SEKUR.com, and use promo code Roman to save 25% off. Their services don't cost that much. It's only $5 for the messenger and $10 for the email and the messenger package, and you can even save 25% off when you use the promo code Roman. Now, Secure, thank you so much for sponsoring our episode. And now, Roman in the studio, back to you. And now let's talk a bit about Cuba. The U.S. Coast Guard just made an amazing announcement. They said that over the past week, they intercepted 27 Cuban migrants who were fleeing to Florida, and then they sent them back to Cuba. Let me just repeat that. Over the past week, the Coast Guard intercepted 27 Cubans who were fleeing their country, and instead of accepting them as refugees, they were sent back to their communist-ruled home country. Now, just for your reference, in case you weren't following it, these people fleeing Cuba comes at a time when the island is facing massive unrest. That was following the protests that sprung up around the entire country 2 weeks ago. Those protests, by the way, saw thousands of people marching through the streets of Cuba, calling for an end to the communist regime and demanding freedom. And as you can imagine, the communist regime wasn't too fond of people who want freedom, and so they cracked down extremely hard. The Cuban Communist Party's paramilitary, they went out, they arrested people en masse, and they began to monitor dissidents in cities and towns across the entire country, which understandably led some people to flee Cuba in the hopes of reaching Florida. And then, according to this news release here that was released by the U.S. Coast Guard just earlier this week, what happened was that last Friday, 22 people were intercepted on a boat about 7 miles south of Key West. And then on Saturday, 5 more people were intercepted on a makeshift raft about 50 miles off of the Florida Keys. But don't worry, all of these people were given food, they were given water, and they were given basic medical attention before being sent right back to Cuba. In fact, here's what the local commander of the U.S. Coast Guard down there in Key West, here's what he said in a statement following these extraditions. Taking to the seas on unsafe vessels is dangerous and can result in loss of life. we request all mariners to report any possible migrant voyages to help prevent loss of life at sea. I just hope those people don't experience loss of life when they're repatriated back home to Cuba. And by the way, just for your reference, this move by the Coast Guard isn't outside of the scope of current policy, because following the Cuban protests 2 weeks ago, here's what the Secretary of Homeland Security said in a statement. The time is never right to attempt migration by sea. To those who risk their lives doing so, this risk is not worth taking. Allow me to be clear. If you take to the sea, you will not come to the United States. Now, the irony of all this, at least to me, is that as Cubans are fleeing communism and being turned away, people who are crossing the southern border are coming in droves. In June, which was just last month, 188,000 illegal aliens were counted by Border Patrol. 188,000 in a single month. That's, by the way, in addition to the thousands of people who slipped by undetected. The 188,000 people were the ones who were actually caught. In fact, if this trend continues, if the current monthly numbers hold on pace, then it's predicted that by the end of this year, by the end of 2021, over 1.8 million migrants will have crossed the border. That would, by the way, be the most illegal entries into this country recorded in American history. Furthermore, as the CDC is telling Americans to once again wear masks and vaccine mandates are going into effect around the country, there seems to be a bit of a blind spot in the national conversation with regards to these border crossers. How so? Well, according to Brian Hastings, who is the Border Patrol chief down in the Rio Grande Valley, he said that last week, his agents saw a 900% increase in border crossers testing positive for the coronavirus. Let me just repeat that. Last week, this Border Patrol chief, who is in charge of one of the busiest sections of the border, he said that he saw a 900% increase in the number of illegal aliens testing positive for the virus. Here's specifically what he said in a statement. Even with the spread of the COVID-19 virus, human smugglers continue to try these brazen attempts with zero regard for the lives they endanger, nor to the health of the citizens of our great nation. Furthermore, the same Border Patrol chief, he told a local radio station that during this fiscal year, 40 of his agents have already tested positive for the virus. Now, this reality is even leading some Democrat lawmakers down in Texas to challenge the federal government's policy. For example, Mr. Henry Cuellar, who is a congressman from Texas, he's a Democrat, he suggested that the Biden administration should pause accepting and or releasing illegal border crossers into local communities. Here's specifically what he said during an interview with Fox News. It's not fair to local communities, people being released there that might have COVID-19. What I'm asking of the Biden administration is to do a pause. Do a pause. They need to prioritize border communities. They need to prioritize the men and women of DHS. Now, his comments, by the way, came on the heels of a new report which found that Border Patrol officers were releasing illegal aliens who test positive for COVID to a nonprofit organization. According to a police chief cited in that report, what's happening is that immigrants are being handed over to the Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, which then arranges them to stay in a local hotel, which they rented out entirely. Here's specifically how that police chief explained the situation at a press conference just 2 days ago. We did not know this. No one told the city of La Joya. No one told the police department that these people were here, and no one told us that these people were possibly ill. Now, we here at the Epic Times, we reached out to this charity for comment on this matter, but we've yet to hear back. However, we did also reach out to the Border Protection Agency, and they responded to us by saying that they are still encountering historic numbers of illegal immigrants crossing the border, and secondly, they told us that they are still actually expelling people under Title 42. And in case you don't know what that is, back in March of last year, so back in March of 2020, President Trump implemented what is known as Title 42, which is the emergency health provision, and it essentially closed the border to non-essential travel. That was, of course, when the pandemic first began, and Title 42 was what President Trump used to close the border. It essentially allowed for Border Patrol agents to turn back and expel illegal border crossers almost immediately, rather than have them be placed in custody and then go through a longer deportation process. However, the Biden administration recently introduced an exemption to Title 42, which allowed for unaccompanied children, as well as most family units, to stay in the country once they hit American soil. And so what's been happening is that it's mostly family units and children who are not getting deported. And then, once they're accepted into America, these individuals are released into the interior of the United States, and then they are given one of two things. They are given either a notice to report, meaning that they are obliged to report to a local ICE office once they get settled, or they are given a notice to appear, meaning that they have to appear in immigration court at a certain date. Now, the question is, do these people actually report to the local ICE office, or do they show up to court? Well, according to ICE, the reality is that they are just not able to track all of these thousands of illegal immigrants who are being released into the United States every single week, which then leads to problems in the interior of the U.S., like this one here, where you have a town in Michigan being set up with a resettlement facility. Now, things might or might not change very dramatically in the next few days. That's because the Biden administration had previously planned to phase out Title 42 entirely on July 31st, which is just 2 days from now. If that happens, then Border Patrol agents will be forced to deal with more people, since their ability to kick people out of the country will be greatly diminished. However, there was a report released just yesterday in the Washington Post, which cited anonymous officials who are allegedly working on border policy within the White House, and they said that the plan to phase out Title 42 has been put on hold. But again, those are anonymous sources, and there hasn't been any official announcement as of yet. We here at the Epic Times, we in fact reached out to the Department of Homeland Security to get confirmation on whether Title 42 will be phased out or not, but we have yet to hear back. Regardless, Mr. Henry Cuellar, who is again the Democrat lawmaker from Texas, he said that given the current situation, he not only supports Title 42, but also wishes that the Biden administration would actually be more vocal about it. Here's specifically what he said. I support Title 42, especially right now. They need to publicize and show images of people being deported. Because I ask you, have you seen one single picture of somebody being deported? No, I haven't seen one. I see people coming in, but we're not showing people being deported. These numbers are not stopping, and with all due respect to the administration, they need to put a pause on this now for the sake of our border communities. Now, if you'd like to read more about what's happening over at the southern border, or about the Cubans that are fleeing communism but then being turned back, the links to all those articles will be down in the description box for you to check out. And now lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed while YouTube still allows it. If you have an Instagram account, follow me at Epic Times Roman, where I post spicy memes and behind-the-scenes research. And until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. Stay informed and stay free. Good evening. Just yesterday, over in New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo officially resigned. However, while everyone is focused on these sexual harassment allegations, the FBI, they quietly dropped their investigation into the way that he handled nursing homes. Meanwhile, protests against vaccine mandates have been springing up across the country. And 2 days ago, we had teams on the ground in both New York as well as California, and we got a chance to ask people what they think about vaccine passports. And lastly, some companies are getting creative with the way that they are pushing vaccines. In fact, a new report shows that some companies are starting to consider deducting $50 from the paychecks of unvaccinated employees. Let's go through it all together. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. Now let's begin today's discussion by talking about Andrew Cuomo. But actually, just before we do, as a super quick aside, right there at the very top of the description box is a link to Epic TV, which is our brand new no censorship video platform where you can find all of the awesome Epic Times video programs like The Larry Elder Show, American Thought Leaders, China in Focus, Life and Times, Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon, as well as our show Facts Matter. And on there we'll publish exclusive episodes as well as full-length interviews that frankly, because of the censorship here on YouTube, I don't feel comfortable publishing on this platform. The link to Epic TV will be right there at the very top of the description box. I hope you check it out. And now let's really talk about Andrew Cuomo. As you've likely already heard, just yesterday, Andrew Cuomo, who is of course the governor of New York, he announced his resignation. Now, we already discussed in a previous episode all of the findings of this sexual harassment report which was compiled against him, but in short, the Attorney General of New York found that Mr. Cuomo sexually harassed 11 women and retaliated against a former employee, violating both federal and state laws in the process. Here's what the Attorney General said in presenting her findings to the public.
Specifically, the investigation found that Governor Andrew Cuomo sexually harassed current and former New York State employees by engaging in unwelcome and non-consensual touching and making numerous offensive comments of a suggestive and sexual nature that created a hostile work environment for women.
Now, to this day, Andrew Cuomo has maintained his innocence, and he said that he did not intentionally show disrespect toward any woman and that the claims made against him were politically motivated. Furthermore, it's also worth noting that the Attorney General did not actually charge Mr. Cuomo with any crimes, although there are currently several sheriffs as well as prosecutors here in New York that are looking into that possibility. Regardless, with mounting pressure against him from all sides, including from within his own party, within the Democratic Party, Andrew Cuomo made the decision to quit, saying this in a speech yesterday. It is a matter of life and death. Government operations and wasting energy on distraction is the last thing government should be. I cannot be the cause. The best way I can help now is if I step aside and let government get back to government. Now, his resignation will be effective 2 weeks from now, at which point Ms. Kathy Hochul, who is currently the lieutenant governor, she will officially replace Mr. Cuomo as the governor of New York, and she will actually be the first female governor in the state's history. She will also serve as governor until at least the next gubernatorial election, which is in November of 2022, of next year. Now, there is something worth noting here, though. And that is, as the corporate media outlets in this country are focusing on these sexual harassment allegations, it seems like everyone has forgotten the nursing home scandal. Specifically, how the Cuomo administration forced recovering COVID patients to go into nursing homes and then subsequently concealed thousands of COVID deaths among the nursing home population. However, as we mentioned in our previous episode, the FBI decided to quietly kill that investigation into these nursing homes, not only in New York, but also in the other states that had these problems as well, meaning that accountability will likely not come. If you'd like to read more about what's happening with Mr. Andrew Cuomo, I'll throw those links into the description box below this video for you to check out, which is, by the way, that description box right next to the like button, which I hope you take a quick moment to smash. Because honestly, it goes without saying that videos that are like this, talking honestly about what is happening in this world, are routinely censored by big tech giants like YouTube. However, when you smash that like button below this video, you are forcing the YouTube algorithm to share this video out to potentially thousands of more people, letting the truth be known far and wide. And now, while we're talking about what's happening here in New York, let's discuss the protests which have been springing up against vaccine passports. 2 days ago, a crowd of New Yorkers gathered outside of City Hall in order to protest against the vaccine mandate, which was recently announced by Bill de Blasio, who is the mayor of New York. For your reference, by the way, in case you haven't heard, last week, New York became the first city in America which will set up a vaccine passport. According to Bill de Blasio, starting next month, specifically starting on September 13th, New Yorkers will have to show proof of vaccination in order to go to a restaurant, a gym, or a performance. Let me just repeat that. Starting next month, in order for you to go to a restaurant, a gym, or a performance here in New York, you will have to show proof that you're vaccinated. Here's specifically what Bill de Blasio said when he announced this new rule. It's time for people to see vaccination as necessary to living a good and full and healthy life. It will require vaccination for workers and customers in indoor dining, in indoor fitness facilities, indoor entertainment facilities. The only way to patronize these businesses indoors is if you're vaccinated. If you want to participate in society fully, you've got to get vaccinated. However, not everyone here in New York is on board this vaccine mandate train, given the fact that there was a protest at City Hall on Monday. Now, we here at the Epoch Times, we had our reporters there on the ground, and we got a chance to speak with some of the people who were there. For instance, Ms. Josephine Rose, who is one of the organizers of this protest, she said that as a city worker, she feels that the vaccine mandate is a form of government overreach. Here's specifically what she told us. I was just told that by the 13th, I either get vaccinated or I have to get weekly tested. But it is my body and my choice. I feel like it's government overreach. We should all have a choice. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I believe in the choice of the people. I was vaccinated as a child, but as an adult, I decide over my body. My parents no longer have any rights over me, and it should be the same with the government. Another one of the organizers told us that his main concern with the vaccine pass is that the whole system has a technocratic side to it, which could allow the government to monitor people's lives. Here's what he said. My concern is that the vaccine pass is opening the door to a completely tyrannical new system of surveillance and control. I think more and more people are finally understanding this. This is not about so-called vaccines. This is about surveillance and digitizing our economy, digitizing our everyday life. And it's already been happening over the past 10, 20 years with our phones. But they're taking it to the next level now where everything is tracked remotely through your phone. And now they're advancing the technology. Now, New York was not the only place that held these types of protests over the last few days. In fact, just 2 days ago, hundreds of healthcare workers over in California came out to protest against, likewise, vaccine mandates. Specifically, more than 400 medical professionals in Southern California, they rallied outside of the Riverside Community Hospital in order to protest California's requirement that all health workers be fully vaccinated. Now, likewise, we had one of our reporters on the ground there as well, and she got a chance to speak with the people as they showed up. She spoke with a nurse named Heather, who is one of the founders of America's Healthcare Workers for Medical Freedom. That's the organization which organizes protests in California. And Heather told us that many of the participants were actually frontline health workers during the pandemic. Here's what she said. We're not anti-vaccine, we're anti-mandate. We have worked the whole entire year and a half, and now they want to fire us if we don't get the vaccine. So we truly believe that's wrong, and we should have the choice. The same nurse further stressed that if these compulsory measures are in fact enforced and the hospital decides to fire their staff members, that will have a negative effect on the level of patient care. Here's what she said. I believe that it's the wrong decision because it puts patients at risk. The quality of care will go down if they fire tons of staff in the hospital. So we're all doing this together because we don't agree with it. Another nurse that we interviewed over at this protest, she expressed a similar viewpoint. Here's what she said. Now, I'm feeling like our freedom is getting stripped away from us, not just because I'm a nurse, but also I'm an American citizen and I believe in freedom, and most of all, freedom of choice. Now, we also spoke with a woman named Jay, who works in the emergency room inside of a medical center over in California, and she told us that, in her opinion, the government policies regarding vaccination have been politicized in the name of safety. But she says it's not all for safety. Here's specifically what she said. It is a forced policy. We are American. This is a free country. We don't live in a socialist country, a communist country. It is just slowly taking freedoms away. And if this was mandated, what's next? She further stressed that healthcare workers are educated professionals and therefore they should be allowed to make their own choices. Now, furthermore, one of the organizers told us that so far they have held 7 rallies across California. And given the fact that the vaccine mandate is coming up soon, by September 30th it goes into full effect, we can likely expect to see more such rallies popping up all over the entire state over the course of the next few weeks. And as they do, we here at the Epic Times, we will be there on site, on the ground, covering them. And now, before we move on over and talk about some creative approaches that some companies are taking to get their employees vaccinated, I'd like to take a quick moment and introduce our sponsor for today's episode, and I will do so from the sound booth. I wanted to take a quick moment and introduce our sponsor for today's episode, which is an awesome company called AMAC, or AMAC, and it stands for the Association of Mature American Citizens. Now, I do consider myself a mature American citizen, but I'm about 19 years too young to join AMAC. However, if you or someone in your family is 50 years old or over, I would consider joining because they are essentially the conservative alternative to the AARP, and they offer 3 main benefits to their members. The first is the money-saving benefit because they partner with a ton of retailers across the country and offer you discounts on things like vitamins, insurance policies, and so on. The list is pretty long. I'll throw a link to it in the description box below. The second is that members get a subscription to their magazine. And even though I'm not a member, I have read their magazine and it's filled with thought-provoking articles. Very good. I'd highly recommend it. And then the third benefit, which a lot of people say is their favorite, is that AMAC fights on Capitol Hill against what they're calling the socialist storm that's brewing in America. So again, I would highly recommend you check them out. It's not too expensive. It's only $16 per year, but it looks like the benefits outweigh the cost by a wide margin. Again, you can go over to amac.us/factsmatter or just click in the link in the description box below. And AMAC, thank you so much for sponsoring our episode. Now, Roman in the studio, back to you. However, while it's worth noting that certain places like California and New York City are enforcing vaccine requirements by issuing mandates, other businesses have gotten more creative. For instance, according to a statement made by a consultancy firm, some companies are starting to consider deducting $50 from the paychecks of unvaccinated employees. Here's specifically what a partner over at Mercer, which is a health benefits consultancy group, here's what he said in an interview with Forbes magazine. Employers have tried encouraging employees to get vaccinated through offering incentives like paid time off and cash. But with the Delta variant driving up infections and hospitalizations throughout the country, at the same time that vaccination rates have stalled, we have received inquiries from at least 20 employers over the past few weeks who are giving consideration to adding health coverage surcharges to the unvaccinated as a way to drive up vaccination rates in their workforce. Now, let me just reiterate what he said. According to that statement, there are employers in this country which are starting to consider deducting money from the paychecks of their unvaccinated employees. Now, to give you some background on this, up until now, different companies in this country have offered gift cards, days off from work, cash, as well as other financial incentives in order to convince their employees to get the shot. That was you can call it the carrot approach. However, now some companies are turning to the stick. According to that interview, these companies are considering tacking on a $50 per month charge to their unvaccinated employees, which is actually similar to what some companies already charge their employees who smoke cigarettes. Their reasoning, according to that article at least, is that COVID-19 can lead to serious illness and an expensive hospital stay that cause the worker and company paid insurance, triggering premium increases as well. Now, while some companies are planning to tax the unvaccinated, others are just not going to be letting them in the building. These are companies like Google, Facebook, and Walmart, and it was just recently announced that America's largest employer will also take this approach as well. Now, I'm of course talking about the U.S. military. That's right, 2 days ago, the Secretary of Defense came out and he said that he will require all active duty members of the military to get the vaccine. In a memo that he sent to all Pentagon employees, Lloyd Austin, who is the Defense Secretary, he said that the requirement will be coming up in the next few days, and here's specifically what he said in that memo. I want you to know that I will seek the President's approval to make the vaccines mandatory no later than mid-September or immediately upon the FDA's licensure, whichever comes first. Now, what he's referring to there, in case you're not aware, is the fact that the COVID vaccines, whether you're talking about the Moderna, the Pfizer, or the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, they are all currently under what's known as emergency use authorization by the FDA, meaning that even though they have been tested, they are currently not fully authorized. And that is, by the way, the exact reason why, up until now, military personnel were able to decline the shot. Because at the moment, since the vaccine is labeled under emergency use authorization, that means that it's voluntary. Soldiers cannot be mandated to take it like other vaccines. However, that is exactly what Lloyd Austin is trying to change. He is seeking to get a waiver from the president in order to make these vaccines mandatory. Here's what he said. The intervening few weeks will be spent preparing for this transition. I have every confidence that service leadership and your commanders will implement this new vaccination program with professionalism, skill, and compassion. We will have more to say about this as implementation plans are fully developed. And based on public statements, it looks like Joe Biden is in fact on board. In fact, here's what he said in this regard. Being vaccinated will enable our service members to stay healthy, to better protect their families, and to ensure that our force is ready to operate anywhere in the world. Now, the big question, the one that you might be asking yourself, is whether this is actually legal. And according to a letter which was sent to Lloyd Austin from 60 members of the House, they say it's not. Here's what part of that letter said. The law of the United States is clear. Mandatory vaccination is illegal for military personnel prior to complete approval. As long as the vaccine is authorized under an emergency use authorization, the Department of Defense does not have the authority to implement such an order. Service members who do not wish to receive the vaccine cannot be required until the approval process is completed. Any action to require it is illegal. The Secretary of Defense is not above the law. For your reference, by the way, in that letter, they then went on to cite the National Research Act of 1974, as well as a court decision in Doe versus Rumsfeld, which is a case back in 2004. However, all this debate might actually be unnecessary, as some government officials have suggested that the Pfizer vaccine might become FDA approved sometime later this month, in August. And so we'll just have to wait and see how all of this ultimately plays out. If you'd like to read the statements from either the Defense Secretary, or if you would like to read the relevant laws regarding these forced vaccinations in the military, I'll throw all that into the description box below this video for you to check out. And now let's move on over and really talk about Bill Gates. Specifically about the fact that a company which is backed by Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, as well as Michael Bloomberg, will be carrying out mineral research explorations over in Greenland. So the exploration company is called Kobold, and what they do is that they use artificial intelligence as well as machine learning to hunt for raw materials. And for your reference, by the way, the principal backers of this company, they include Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which was founded by Bill Gates and whose investors include Jeff Bezos, Michael Bloomberg, as well as Ray Dalio, and then also Equinor, which is a Norwegian state-owned energy company, and also Andreessen Horowitz, which is a Silicon Valley venture capital firm. They're also all investors in this company. And according to a statement released just 2 days ago, Kobold has signed an agreement with another company called Blue Jay, which is a mining company, and together they will explore the west coast of Greenland. Now, why? Well, according to that statement, studies have found that the area in the western part of Greenland is similar in geology to the Norilsk region of Russia, which has an abundance of nickel and palladium. According to the CEO of Kobold, the west coast of Greenland has seen the rare convergence of events in Earth's history that could have resulted in forming a world-class battery metal deposit. Specifically, according to the mining company, this region, which by the way covers an area of about 1,000 square miles, is expected to be high in nickel, cobalt, platinum, as well as copper. Now, why is this project so important, you might be asking yourself? Well, besides just generally tracking what Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, and Michael Bloomberg are up to, this project also has very important implications to the possible future of electric vehicles here in America. That's because, as you might have heard, last week, Joe Biden said that he will be pushing car manufacturers to have half of their new vehicles sold here in America be electric by the year 2030. In fact, he described it as an executive order setting out a target of 50% of all passenger vehicles sold by 2030 will be electric and set into motion an all-out effort. Now, while not legally binding, meaning that car manufacturers don't legally have to have 50% of their cars be electric by the year 2030, this executive order instead creates the conditions which might push that agenda forward. This includes creating 500,000 new charging stations across America, expanding federal tax credits to incentivize people to buy electric, as well as to direct federal tax dollars to both research and develop new battery designs that can be made here in America. And that is key, to be made here in America, because right now, the ones who are currently benefiting the most from this electric vehicle push, at least economically, is China. In fact, even Joe Biden himself acknowledged that reality. Here's what he said. Right now, China is leading the race and is one of the largest and fastest growing electric vehicle markets in the world. And a key part of the electric vehicle, to state the obvious, is the battery. And right now, 80% of the manufacturing capacity for these batteries is done in China. But the issue actually goes way beyond manufacturing, because China has a near stranglehold on the global mining industry, specifically mining for the metals and the rare minerals that are needed for batteries. Now, if you want to go deeper into this subject, by the way, I would highly recommend a book called China Safari. It goes through how China has been expanding into Africa over the last several decades and how they've built pretty much a global monopoly on mining. But just to give you a summary of it, here's how mining.com describes the situation in an article. China consumes as much industrial metals and battery minerals as the rest of the world combined. Chinese direct investment overseas in mines and projects topped $1 billion in 2017 for the first time and peaked in 2019 at nearly $2.2 billion, with cobalt and lithium its favorite targets. Now, specifically, crucial to electric vehicle batteries are cobalt and lithium. And according to that same article from mining.com, China has a stranglehold on the electric vehicle supply chain, with chemical processors and refiners responsible for 82% and 60% of midstream production of cobalt and lithium, respectively. China's control of refining is north of 80%, makes cobalt a particular headache for automakers. And so, with this push to have more electric vehicles sold here in America, that will likely not only be a bonanza for the Chinese mining industry, but it also puts our national transportation infrastructure in danger, since China is, of course, not a regular country. It's a hostile foreign power ruled by a communist party who openly aims to displace and undermine America. Which then brings us full circle back to the discussion of Bill Gates and his new mining explorations over in Greenland. Because if they are able to indeed find nickel, cobalt, and platinum as well as copper, then not only will they get a hefty profit out of it, but it can also help alleviate our reliance on Chinese metals. Now, if you'd like to read more about this electric vehicle push, about this new mining venture, or if you'd like to check out that book I mentioned earlier called China Safari, I'll throw all those links into the description box below this video for you to check out. And now lastly, as we've already mentioned in several previous episodes, on the very same day that Joe Biden was sworn into office, YouTube made the unilateral decision to demonetize our program. We can now no longer run any ads before, during, or after episodes, and the Super Chat feature has just been disabled. They're essentially snuffing out our ability to monetize our program. However, we here at the Epic Times, we did not take this lying down, and instead we created something very cool. It's called Epic TV. It's our brand new no-censorship video platform where you can find all of the awesome Epic Times video content, like The Larry Elder Show, American Thought Leaders, Crossroads with Joshua Phillip, China in Focus, Counterpunch with Trevor Loudon, Life and Times, as well as our program Facts Matter. And on there, we'll publish exclusive episodes as well as exclusive interviews that, frankly, due to the censorship here on YouTube, I don't feel comfortable publishing on this platform. So you can check that out. The link to it will be right there at the very top of the description box. I hope you click on it. I hope you check it out. I hope you subscribe. And I hope that you join us on this journey of exploring this beautiful, beautiful world through honest journalism that's based in truth and tradition. Now, lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed. Also, if you're already subscribed, hit that notification bell so you can be notified of any new video as soon as we publish them. Also, if you have an Instagram account, follow me at Epic Times Roman. I publish spicy memes as well as behind-the-scenes research regularly. And then, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. Stay informed and stay free. Good evening. There are currently about 11,000 Americans who are still stuck over in Afghanistan. However, fortunately, it appears that they are being left alone and allowed to evacuate safely. Meanwhile, after taking over the provincial capitals, as well as the capital city of Kabul, the Taliban was able to seize billions of dollars worth of American military equipment. This includes guns, ammunition, rocket launchers, as well as Black Hawk helicopters. And lastly, as thousands of Afghans are fleeing the country, the United States government is opening our borders and setting up temporary housing in Texas and in Wisconsin. Let's go through it all together. This is your daily Facts Matter update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epic Times. And now let's begin today's discussion by talking about what's happening over in Afghanistan. As I'm sure you've already seen, this past Sunday, the Taliban took over Afghanistan when they marched into the city of Kabul and without resistance pretty much took it over within a few hours. they entered the presidential palace in Kabul. The Afghan president fled to another country, and again, within hours, the capital takeover was complete. And after this happened, the American troops who were still stationed in Kabul, they shifted their focus to keeping the airport secure so that people can flee the country. And I do say people, not necessarily American citizens, because Afghans, special visa recipients, as well as American citizens are all currently fleeing the country. Here's in fact what Jen Psaki said on this point. Our focus right now is on doing the work at hand and on the task at hand, and that is day by day getting as many American citizens, as many special immigration visa applicants, as many members of vulnerable populations who are eligible to be evacuated to the airport and on a plane. Now, fortunately, the Taliban has agreed to allow for safe passage to civilians who are fleeing the country. And I do say fortunately, because given how everybody was unprepared by this sudden blitzkrieg, there could have been a lot of casualties. So the fact that they are allowing people to leave without any incident is indeed quite fortunate. Although, frankly, it's also in the Taliban's best interest to do it this way. After a meeting with senior Taliban leaders, here's what a statement from General Frank McKenzie, who is the commander of U.S. Central Command, here's what he said. I cautioned them, meaning the Taliban, against interference in our evacuation and made it clear to them that any attack would be met with overwhelming force in the defense of our forces. And so, instead of poking the American sleeping giant, it appears that the Taliban is allowing for a peaceful evacuation, after which they can focus on consolidating their control over the country. Here's what the White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, here's what he told reporters on that front. The Taliban have informed us that they are prepared to provide the safe passage of civilians to the airport, and we intend to hold them to that commitment. And when he was asked by a reporter whether he believes them, he simply answered, yes. And so, what is happening right now at this very moment? So, to start with, as we're filming this video, there are currently about 11,000 Americans who are still stuck in what is now Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. This figure came from a statement that was made by Jen Psaki, and here's specifically what she said on that front. There are individuals who will self-identify as American citizens. That number is around 11,000 around the country. However, it's not exactly clear whether that is the official number. In fact, earlier in the day, there was an official from the Pentagon who said that the number could actually be significantly lower. Here's what he said. By the way, this man's name is John Kirby. He is the Pentagon spokesman, and here's what he said during an interview with CNN. We think there are certainly thousands of Americans. We don't have an exact count. I would say somewhere, best guess, between 5,000 and 10,000 that are near Kabul. And to be frank, I was a bit surprised to learn that the government has such a hard time pinning the number down. I just assumed that when you're traveling overseas, since you're using your passport, all of that stuff is kept on record. Regardless, the American government officials are urging the Americans who are still in Afghanistan to travel to the Hamid Karzai International Airport in order to leave the country. And I'm sure you've seen some of the footage that has been coming out of that airport over the last few days. Take a look at it here. Pretty much bedlam at the airport. People are trying to leave. People are stuffing themselves into the airplane, chasing the airplane. People have sadly even tried to hang on to the airplane as it's taking off and tragically fallen to the ground as they were trying to escape Afghanistan. At the moment, there are both military flights as well as some commercial flights that are ferrying people out of the country and into America. And they are evacuating both American citizens as well as Afghans who are wishing to leave the country. At the moment, members of the Taliban are positioned on the outskirts of the airport, but according to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, he said that the Taliban have informed us that they are prepared to provide the safe passage of civilians to the airport, and we intend to hold them to that commitment. However, this armed takeover was not without incident. There are currently 2,500 American troops who are stationed at this airport, and 2 days ago, they were shot at. They returned fire, and they killed 2 armed individuals, although at the moment, no official statement has come out about who these armed individuals were. No statement has been made whether they were Taliban or not. However, since then, things have actually not escalated. In fact, the situation seems to be much like how a CNN correspondent described it while reporting from Kabul. They are chanting death to America, but they seem friendly. And along that line, Pentagon officials have said that there are no indications that the Taliban has attacked either the airport or the Americans who are still in the country, which is frankly very, very lucky given the fact that, again, everybody was caught with their pants down. Now, in terms of the evacuations, between August 14th and August 17th, so between Sunday and Tuesday, about 1,500 people have been evacuated. However, Pentagon officials are saying that they are ramping up this evacuation effort and hoping to reach a capacity of being able to evacuate 9,000 people per day, which would approximately be one aircraft leaving per hour. According to a U.S. official, the goal is to complete all evacuations by August 31st, which is about a week and a half from now. And you might be asking yourself, once the Afghans, not the Americans, but the Afghans are evacuated, where exactly are they going to go? Well, that's a great question, and I'll tell you about that right after I introduce our sponsor for today's episode, which I'll do from the sound booth. I wanted to take a quick moment and introduce our sponsor for today's episode, which is an awesome company called AMAC, or AMAC, and it stands for the Association of Mature American Citizens. Now, I do consider myself a mature American citizen, but I'm about 19 years too young to join AMAC. However, if you or someone in your family is 50 years old or over, I would consider joining because they are essentially the conservative alternative to the AARP, and they offer three main benefits to their members. The first is the money-saving benefit because they partner with a ton of retailers across the country and offer you discounts on things like vitamins, insurance policies, and so on. The list is pretty long. I'll throw a link to it in the description box below. The second is that members get a subscription to their magazine. And even though I'm not a member, I have read their magazine, and it's filled with thought-provoking articles. Very good. I'd highly recommend it. And then the third benefit, which a lot of people say is their favorite, is that AMAC fights on Capitol Hill against what they're calling the socialist storm that's brewing in America. So again, I would highly recommend you check them out. It's not too expensive. It's only $16 per year, but it looks like the benefits outweigh the cost by a wide margin. Again, you can go over to amac.us/factsmatter or just click in the link in the description box below. And AMAC, thank you so much for sponsoring our episode. Now, Roman in the studio, back to you. Now, again, you might be asking yourself, once the Afghans are evacuated, not the American citizens, but the Afghans, where are they exactly going to go? Well, according to the Pentagon, the U.S. is preparing to accommodate tens of thousands of Afghan refugees on American military installations right here at home. Here's what the Pentagon press secretary said just 3 days ago. We want to have the capacity to get up to several thousand immediately and want to be prepared for the potential of tens of thousands. Forts Bliss and McCoy have the capability right now, and what's advantageous is with a little bit of work, they could increase their capacity in very short order. For your reference, by the way, Fort Bliss is a military base over in El Paso, Texas, and Fort McCoy is over in Wisconsin. And furthermore, the Pentagon press secretary also implied that American citizens will not always be prioritized above the Afghans who are applying for special immigrant visas. Here's what he said on that front. Once we get more airlift out of Kabul, we're going to put as many people on those planes as we can. There will be a mix, not just American citizens, but perhaps some Afghan special immigrant visa applicants as well. It's not just going to be Americans first. It's not going to be just Americans first, then special immigrant visa applicants. We're going to focus on getting as many folks out as we can. Now, we here at the Epic Times, we reached out to the Defense Department for comment, and they clarified to us what their plans actually are. They told us that Lloyd Austin, who is the defense secretary, he has approved 2 requests regarding these people who are fleeing Afghanistan. Here's what they said in an email to us. Under the first request, the Defense Department will provide temporary housing, sustainment, and support inside the United States for up to 22,000 Afghan special immigrant visa applicants, their families, and other at-risk individuals. Under the second request, the department will provide protection, air transportation, and processing for up to 30,000 at-risk individuals from Kabul. This total includes embassy personnel, U.S. citizens, Afghan special immigrant visa applicants, and other at-risk individuals. And so what it looks like will happen is that 30,000 individuals will be airlifted by the military, 8,000 of them will be sent to a third country, and 22,000 of them will be transported by the military into the United States. And once they are inside of our country, they will be relinquished from the jurisdiction of the Department of Defense, and the Department of State will then be responsible for any travel, transport, or anything else related to them afterwards. In fact, here's a joint statement from these 2 departments, from the State and the Defense Department. Here's what they said. And we will accelerate the evacuation of thousands of Afghans eligible for U.S. special immigrant visas, nearly 2,000 of whom have already arrived in the United States over the past 2 weeks. For all categories, Afghans who have cleared security screening will be continued to be transferred directly to the United States, and we will find additional locations for those yet to be screened. Now, besides these civilians, over in Kabul, there are currently over 4,000 American soldiers who are on the ground, with at least another 2,000 soldiers expected to arrive as backup in the next few days. Now, it's unclear right now as to whether these soldiers will remain there on the ground after August 31st. In fact, U.S. officials declined to comment about it when they were asked. However, the Taliban were more vocal on this point. During an interview with Sky News, a spokesperson for the Taliban said that all American troops must leave the country by September 11th. Here's what he said. Get your troops out of Afghanistan. They have already violated the time frame that was enshrined in the Doha Agreement. We are committed not to attack them, and we have not attacked them. Now, while the Taliban are pushing to have Americans leave the country as fast as possible, they are not so keen on America's military equipment leaving the country. In fact, videos which were uploaded to social media show the Taliban confiscating what appears to be huge stockpiles of American military equipment that we gave to the Afghan military, but which is now in the hands of the Taliban. This includes large arsenals of guns, ammunition, grenade launchers, even Black Hawk helicopters. Millions upon millions of dollars, perhaps even billions of dollars of American military equipment is now in the hands of the Taliban. And don't forget, when I say billions of dollars, that's billions of American tax dollars gone to the Taliban. Now, when he was asked about these Black Hawk helicopters as well as other equipment that was left behind, Jake Sullivan, who is again the White House National Security Advisor, here's what he told a reporter. Those Black Hawks were not given to the Taliban. They were given to the Afghan National Security Forces to be able to defend themselves. So the president had a choice. We could not give it to them with the risk that it would fall into the Taliban's hands eventually, or give it to them with the hope that they could deploy it in service of defending their country. Both of those options had risks. He had to choose, and he made a choice. However, when Jake Sullivan was pressed a bit further on this point, here's what he said. We don't have a complete picture, obviously, of where every article of defense material has gone. But certainly, a fair amount of it has fallen into the hands of the Taliban. And obviously, we don't have a sense they are going to readily hand it over to us at the airport. And so, within the course of about a week, America's $83 billion investment into the Afghan army fell into the hands of the Taliban. And of course, it's not all just about the weaponry. Here are some videos of Taliban militants playing on bumper cars. And here's another video of them trying to use exercise equipment. It looks like perhaps they are using it for the first time. That is fascinating and an excellent use of our hard-earned tax dollars at work. And so you might be asking yourself, what does the future hold for Afghanistan? Well, at the very least, we can look at the past as a reference. If you remember, back in the 90s, when the Taliban ruled over Afghanistan between the years of 1996 and 2001, they guided their administration according to Sharia law. Back then, the Taliban stopped women from working, they administered punishments like public stoning, girls were not allowed to go to school, and women had to wear full burqas when they were out in public. Now, it's not clear whether they will actually go back to that. However, we do have a few statements from a Taliban spokesman to get a glimpse into what they're actually thinking. According to Mr. Mujahid, who is the Taliban spokesman, he said that the Taliban will not seek retribution against either former soldiers or against members of the Western-backed Afghan government. Instead, he said that they are granting amnesty to former Afghan soldiers, contractors, and translators who worked with international as well as American forces. Second of all, he made another reassuring statement. He said that no groups will be allowed to use Afghanistan to launch terrorist attacks. Now, if you remember, back during the 90s when the Taliban were in control of the country, they did in fact harbor terrorist networks like Al-Qaeda. However, the spokesman said that that was a thing of the past. Here's specifically what he said on that front. I would like to assure the international community, including the United States, that nobody will be harmed. In Afghanistan, I would like to assure our neighbors, our original countries, we are not going to allow our territory to be used against anybody or any country in the world. So the whole global community should be assured that we are committed to these pleasures, that you will not be harmed. Now, this assurance that the Taliban won't attack other countries was actually part of the peace deal which was brokered between the Taliban and the Trump administration last year in 2020. However, we'll have to wait and see whether that actually holds. There are already some indications that it might not. For instance, on Sunday, when the Taliban took over Kabul, other terror groups celebrated their victory on social media. Furthermore, the Taliban actually shares a similar worldview to Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, ISIS, as well as other Sunni Islamist groups. And in fact, there were several reports which show that last week, both ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists who were jailed in Afghanistan, they were freed from jail by the Taliban when they were taking over different provinces. And so we'll just have to wait and see what actually happens, whether they'll hold up any of these promises. Although some people are already sounding the alarm. For instance, Charles Lister, who is a senior fellow with the Middle East Institute, he wrote this in a post on Medium. This is without a doubt the most significant day for Al-Qaeda since 9/11. For the first time in years, not only does al-Qaeda finally have some breathing space, it's being gifted an enormously significant safe haven in which to rebuild. Likewise, the Pentagon, they issued a warning of a worsening terror threat, with an official from the Pentagon making this statement. The Secretary of Defense certainly believes that, in light of recent events, that a reassessment of the possibilities for reconstitution of terrorist networks inside Afghanistan is warranted. Now, it might be worth mentioning that besides these actual terrorists, the Taliban, which hold a threat to America, last Friday, right before the fall of Afghanistan, the Department of Homeland Security issued a new national terrorism bulletin, which included this statement here. There are also continued non-specific calls for violence on multiple online platforms which are associated with domestic violent extremist ideologies or conspiracy theories on perceived election fraud and alleged reinstatement of President Trump, and responses to anticipated restrictions relating to the increasing COVID cases. And so let me just reiterate. On the eve of the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, Homeland Security in this country issues a terror alert. And they say this terror advisory is not based on any actual threats or plots. However, they say that there is a rise in anti-government rhetoric, of some of it being in opposition to mask mandates, vaccine mandates, while other people are griping about election fraud. Now, lastly, what I really wanted to know was how American veterans felt about these developments. And so we here at the Epic Times, we got a chance to interview several vets, and for the most part, they expressed a combination of anger and sadness over these developments. For instance, Dr. Tony Brooks, who is a former member of the Army Rangers and who served in Afghanistan, he told us that he's now questioning whether any of it was worth it. Here's what he said. I've experienced literally every emotion during this past week. I know what this means. I know where this is going. I went over there to fight. I don't know what it was for at this point. It feels very much like a complete failure. Vietnam 2.0. Now, in terms of the lives and money that were lost, he said that he is appalled that nearly 2,450 American service members have died and about $2 trillion have been spent in the 20-year-long campaign. Here's what he said on that front. I did not risk my life to watch women in Afghanistan turn into slaves. They will suffer the greatest setback in women's rights that we've seen in our lifetime. We finally have women in Afghanistan that are adults who have lived under a regime where they've had rights. Now, the Taliban is taking those rights and enslaving them. Now, we also spoke with a man named Bill Vaughn, who lives down in Florida and who lost a son who was a Navy SEAL, and here's what he said. I've never seen such a tragedy unfold in my lifetime. It's really inexplicable to describe in my mind how badly the Biden administration has handled the crisis. There is no reason for us to flee like dogs with our tails between our legs. He, meaning Biden, is full of insults for everybody else. You just can't hardly believe that people are that stupid. It makes you wonder if it wasn't done on purpose. Another man, a former U.S. Marine corporal who served overseas and who lost friends in Afghanistan, he questioned the leadership that led to this humiliating takeover of the country by the Taliban. Here's what he told us. I don't know if the war was worth it. Honestly, I really don't know. They told me it was a waste of time. All my buddies that are over there. My biggest thing is the families that have lost a father, a son, or daughter. Furthermore, I sat down with Joe Kent, who was formerly in the Army Special Forces, and he served under the administrations of Clinton, Trump, Obama, and Bush. And here's what he said, although granted, this interview was before the fall of Kabul.
I served in the U.S. military and the Army and Special Forces for a little bit over 20 years, did 11 combat deployments, had the opportunity to serve this country downrange, overseas fighting our enemies, greatest honor of my life. In that time, I also saw the establishment really keep us at war for no gain. I was pretty disenfranchised with the way that the Bush administration, the Obama administration used our troops in these endless wars. And that was until President Trump came on the scene and really started putting America first, implementing America first foreign policy, and going about fighting our wars in a different capacity. He gave us the authorities that we needed to go out and crush the Islamic Caliphate. I intended to stay in that capacity serving our country in the national security realm until about 2 years ago when my wife, Shannon Kent, was killed fighting ISIS in Syria. She was also in the military. She was killed about a month after Trump attempted to get our troops out of Syria the first time. So she'd be alive had the deep state, the permanent ruling class, not turned against President Trump to keep our troops in Syria. So that was obviously the most traumatic thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I quit working for the government at that time to take care of my 2 young sons, but I also started speaking out in support of President Trump's foreign policy. I took my children back to the Pacific Northwest, Washington State, where I'm from, to get them closer to my family. And then 2020 happened. We were ravaged with lockdowns and then a series of riots by Antifa and BLM. Our district was assaulted, and our elected officials essentially did nothing to stop that. So then the election happened. The election was, wrought with fraud. My representative, Jamie Herrera Butler, went along with certifying the election results without contesting them, and then she voted for the impeachment of President Trump. And I saw that as a absolute crisis moment that if I sat on the sidelines, our country would continue to be sold down the river by the far radical left, and we would essentially lose the nation that I grew up in, that I fought for. I have 2 young sons who lost their mother when they were very young. And I have to look them in the eyes very soon and explain to them this is the country that their mother gave her life for, and I can't do that right now. So I want to go to Washington, D.C. to restore the will of the people back to Congress.
Oh, sorry, definitely sorry about your loss.
Thank you.
What branch of the military did you serve in?
I was in the Army. My wife was in the Navy.
Oh, so you're an Army Ranger, right?
Ranger and then a Green Beret. Yeah.
So you served actually under Bush, Obama, and then Trump?
That's right. So I went in Clinton for the first 2 years. Yeah, so 2 years Clinton, and then 8 years of Bush, 8 years Obama, and 2 years of Trump.
Can you give any, for the viewers who might have not served, who might have only had some peripheral understanding of what was happening on the ground, can you give us some concrete examples of the differences in styles and administration between those administrations?
Right after 9/11, we went to war for the right reasons. George Bush knew that we had just been attacked. Bill Clinton had let al-Qaeda fester. We were attacked by al-Qaeda under Bill Clinton as well, and he did nothing about it. So really 9/11 was a direct result of Bill Clinton being completely and totally complacent and incompetent. So when we were attacked, Bush sent us to war for all the right reasons. We had to go to Afghanistan to take out al-Qaeda and the Taliban that harbored them. But then we immediately switched directions without the consent of the American people to nation building and wars of regime change. And this is where you really see the military-industrial complex kind of take over, because Bush wanted to go after just al-Qaeda. Then he wanted to do nation building, and then we sold the Iraq war based on lies, which was another experiment in regime toppling, and then nation building. And because so many people on the left as well went along with the right, this became this bipartisan institutional effort to continue nation building in Afghanistan and Iraq. So despite the rhetoric that Obama used as a candidate, he was unable and unwilling to get us out of both those wars. He attempted to get us out of Iraq the first time, but then we ended up going back because it was such a mess because of a bunch of other different reasons. Some of that is Bush's fault, but we ended up going back nonetheless. And then Obama continued the policy of regime change. He executed that in Libya. We have another geostrategic mess there in Libya. And so really, I didn't see any difference until President Trump came on the scene. The first thing he did was he went after the Republican Party's neoconservative ideology. So he gutted the entire foreign policy establishment of the Republican Party and started saying, hey, we don't need to be in these wars forever. We can use decisive military action and the strength of our economy to get most of what we need. We don't need to be in these places. So Trump was really the first break that I saw from the Uniparty's desire to keep us deployed and bleeding everywhere.
Wow. Well, what do you make of the response by the media and also by many members of Congress when Soleimani was taken out? Because that seems like an example of what you're saying, decisive action.
Exactly.
But what do you make of the pushback that he received?
So people need to understand that Iran has been at war with America since 1979 when they overran our embassy and took hostages. They conducted multiple bombings in Beirut. They killed our Marines. They killed the U.S. Head of the CIA in Beirut in the 80s. Countless other actions. They killed hundreds of American troops in Iraq. Iran's been at war with us. George Bush, every president since the Islamic Revolution refused to deal with that. President Trump drew a hard line, said, I don't want to be at war with Iran. However, if you kill an American, you will feel the pain. Qasem Soleimani and his deputies, they were highly emboldened because no American had ever threatened them before. So they were emboldened to go and kill an American under President Trump's watch, and the first thing he did, he immediately took them off the battlefield. He killed Soleimani and his deputy Abu Mahdi Mohandas without getting us into a new war. It was a great use of military power, and it showed us that the Iranians, they're not invincible, and they can be checked.
Yeah, wow. But what do you make of the response that he received?
Yeah, absolutely. So the response was just partisan. It was very partisan. And I think a lot of people that had been in Washington for a really long time, they felt very insulted because they had been selling this false bill of goods that the Iranians were somehow this thing that we just couldn't mess with. We had to tolerate the Iranians being a state sponsor of terror. We had to tolerate their support for Hamas. We had to tolerate their support for Hezbollah because if we dare mess with them, that all of our forces in the region would be attacked. So Trump went and he checked that conventional wisdom by taking the guy that they said was untouchable off the battlefield. So I think a lot of people were just embarrassed, a lot of human nature. And then just a lot of straight Trump derangement syndrome where people, if Trump did something, the opposite of that has to be good. I think a lot of it was just that basic at that point. But a lot of it was Trump really just once again, he slapped the foreign policy establishment in the face with that move.
Now, if you'd like to go deeper into anything that we've discussed in today's episode, I'll throw all those links into the description box below this video for you to check them out for yourself. And of course, this is an unfolding story, and it's unfolding by the minute, and so we'll keep you abreast of any developments as they're coming about. And now lastly, I'd like to make a small announcement similar to what I said in an earlier episode. If you still watch television, I mean like over the air, cable, satellite, sitting with your family around the couch style television, well, I have good news for you. Because you can now watch our program, Facts Matter, on TV, specifically on NTD. NTD is an awesome cable news network. They're actually a sister media to the Epoch Times, and they report the news in a solid, professional way without all the spin and all the false narratives that you get on other cable news networks. I mean, they're basically a great alternative to the CNN, Fox News, MSNBC monopoly on cable news. And now you can watch our program on their 7:30 p.m. Eastern time slot. Now, they're still growing. Currently, you can watch NTD in 32 different states, but they have coverage on Roku and Apple TV as well, so you can actually watch them over Wi-Fi anywhere. So if you'd like to see how you can watch NTD, whether it's carried by your cable provider, you can go on over to ntd.com/TV. I'll throw a link to it in the description box as well. And if you don't actually get NTV, you can call up your cable provider and ask them, hey, I'd like you to carry NTD. They actually do listen. And actually, one of our viewers, he works at a television station, at a local TV station, and after watching our previous announcement, he actually reached out to NTD, and now he is carrying them on his local channel. So also, if you have any connections in your local TV stations, I'd highly recommend you reach out to NTD and get their broadcast to as many people as possible. Again, I'll throw their link into the description box below. Now, lastly, if you haven't already, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't already in order to get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed while YouTube still allows it. Also, hit that notification bell so you can be notified of any new videos as we release them. Also, if you have an Instagram account, follow me at Epoch Times Roman. I post behind-the-scenes research as well as spicy memes. And until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.